We're doing that. We're keeping that. Welcome. I'm just jumping right in. That's what we're using.
Cool.
I don't know
Let's
if
do
it
it.
sucks. I'm so sorry if we lose followers because of this. Hi, friends, little spoons. Welcome. My name's Catherine.
I'm Gina.
I'm trying to take it back down. Hello. I scream, you scream. That's what you're listening to right now. Every month, we choose a new topic and a new ice cream flavor to go along with it. This month, we're talking about poison. And while we talk about poison, we're going to be eating Ben & Jerry's Cherry Garcia, hashtag not sponsored, but wannabe. And I did not top mine with pretzels. I forgot. Do you have pretzels?
Either. No, I don't have pretzels.
You know what? Cherry Garcia's in. Pretzels are out. No shade to pretzels, but we're fine without them.
We can do what we want.
We can do whatever we want. Grab a spoon and let's dig in.
Cheers.
Cheers.
All right, I'm about to ruin the vibe, but I have to tell you something.
I was going to say, okay, that awkward pause was me reading what you have on the notes, and I was like, oh God, okay, what's this?
So, what I wrote in the notes is, I am reading the most harrowing fucking book. And it's true.
Oh my God, what is it?
It's called The Last Thing to Burn. It's by Will Dean. This is what the cover looks like. And it's fucked. I'm not even a quarter of the way through it. And it's a short book. It's maybe 240 pages.
Oh,
but
I love that length.
Did you ever see or read Room?
Oh my God. She's coming to the bookstore. That author.
Brie Larson? Oh,
no.
Captain Marvel is coming to the bookstore.
So close.
Guess
Sorry
that
to
makes sense
interrupt.
with the author. Yeah, okay.
The author, the one who wrote the book that movie is based on. We do events, and she's coming.
When is she coming? Yeah. That's fucking cool.
I don't remember. I don't retain these things outside of when I'm there. But yes, so sorry. If you like that book or stories like that, I thought that was relevant to you, so I had to share that.
That is cool. Oh, man, if I was still in Milwaukee, I would totally go to that. Because I don't want to say I enjoyed Room, but I couldn't put it down.
Within the context of reading a book, I think it's okay to say that, but I also understand not wanting to say that or feeling like you certainly didn't enjoy the experience, but it was a good reading experience.
Yeah, and I would totally read it again.
Yeah.
And this book is same vibes.
Okay.
Woman
I like books
held
like that.
Captive, very dark, very how am I going to get out of here? Abusive, like human trafficking situation. It's fucked. So
yeah, that's heavy. Those are the types of books that I love reading because those stories, when done well, are now I'm having trouble saying because I don't want to say it's a good story because obviously
it's hard.
Sucks that something like that, those things happen in real life, but it's I think good to have those perspectives, that's the
Yeah, if I didn't read stuff like this from time to time, it would just be very smut 24/7, and that's not healthy for anybody.
Yeah. I think I have a good mix. I cycle through hard and difficult topic stories and fairies and trolls and ghosts and goblins.
Like My Roommate's a Werewolf or the one that you were telling me about?
Oh my God, My Roommate's a Vampire.
Vampire, that's what it is.
Such a good book. That is, I think, my favorite romance novel I've ever read. Oh, you mixed up two titles. I realized the one I was talking about was A Werewolf's Guide to Seducing a Vampire.
That's what it is.
Which I think I was telling you about. So that's confusing because that's kind of both of them. But yeah, two different books. Both were good. My favorite, I would totally read it again this fall, is My Roommate is My Vampire. Or My Vampire. Kinda. My Roommate is a Vampire.
I still need to read
that. I loved that book. I rarely laugh out loud while reading. And I've been doing that a lot lately. I've been reading a lot of really well-written, funny books. And that book, the banter, the back and forth between the characters is just so, you can see it in your head. It feels like watching
I love that.
a romantic comedy. Yeah, it's good. Speaking of books, yeah, I'm very excited about your story today. I was telling Gina before we started recording, I have always been one of those Anastasia Romanoff family fangirls. I have so many biographies of them. And I have one, I looked for it and I was going to pull it. it's not a biography of them. It's like about the historians and stuff looking into the situation afterwards. The reason cool. I bring it's very cool. I'll send it to you, or I'll send you the title when I find it. Basically, the whole purpose of me saying this is I know a lot about the family. I don't know a lot about Rasputin. I know that the movie was the first movie I remember seeing in theater.
Aww.
It's not it's not the first movie I ever saw, but it's the first one I remember seeing. And his, like, not to give a spoiler, but the end scene with him was the scariest thing. I honestly, like, I think the first movie that ever scared the absolute crap out of me.
And that end scene is based on something.
Okay, see, and these are the things I don't know. Yeah, these are the things I don't know.
Oh, so I'm very excited. Fucking much. So yeah, before I get into the actual story, big old trigger warning right up front. I'm going to be telling a story that involves sexual assault. I'm not going to go into detail about what happened, but ye be warned. So if you want to skip to a different episode, that's completely okay. Today we're diving into the completely bizarre life of Russia's mad monk Rasputin. And right off the bat, I'm going to say there's a lot to unpack when it comes to Rasputin. Way more than we can fit into a single episode. I spent so much time trying to get this to only be an hour. So consider this the slightly like unhinged Spark Notes version. We're going to be moving quickly. There's a lot of ground to cover. So let's just take a deep breath and start at the beginning. Okay. So Rasputin was born on the 21st of January in 1869. He was an Aquarius. He was born into a family of peasants in the Siberian village of Pokrovsky. Rasputin's early years are mostly a mystery, but what we do know is that he seemed like he kind of had a rebellious streak. He was really charismatic. He loved drinking. He was a womanizer. And he was really into doing things that pissed off authority. All of the things I love, but I do not love him. I will go on record saying that. He was not a particularly great guy. So when Rasputin was in his late teens, he married a girl named Praskovia. Some time passed. They had a baby boy. Praskovia was expecting another one. And I say Praskovia was expecting it because it's at this point when Rasputin decides to leave their village and go on a religious pilgrimage to a monastery 306 miles away, or 493 kilometers, while his wife is pregnant with a second child.
What the F?
I know, rude, right? So we're not 100% sure why he chose this exact moment to go on a pilgrimage, but there are stories that he had been caught stealing horses in his hometown, so he used this as kind of an excuse to lay low for a while. This wasn't his first rodeo. He had been on a few shorter pilgrimages in the past, but this one seemed to change him. He would later claim that when he got to the monastery, the monks there were basically all having sex with each other, and it was just this weird, like, sinful place. I don't know. The details are kind of fuzzy on that one. But regardless, when he got home a few months later, it's said that he was a changed man. He was way more into religion. He became a vegetarian. He swore off alcohol, which didn't last long. And reportedly, he got a lot more boisterous with his praying and singing. Like, his magnetism was really developing at this stage. From there, he became known as Astronik, which is a Russian word that means kind of like wanderer or pilgrim. Pilgrim isn't an exact translation, though. When you say someone's a pilgrim, it usually implies that there's an end destination. But Stronics observed wandering as kind of a way of life. It was about the journey, not the destination, truly. And as a Stronic, Rasputin would disappear from his village for months or years at a time. And we see this pattern repeated throughout his life. He never really seems to stay in one spot for very long. Despite developing what some would consider this really pious lifestyle, he never actually held a position in the Russian church, ever in his entire life. But that didn't mean that he couldn't become powerful in a religious sense. By the time Rasputin was in his early 30s, his magnetism and kind of religious fervor had started to attract something of a following. And when I say a following, I mean There was a group of locals and family members who would gather with him on Sundays to have secret prayer meetings in his dad's root cellar.
What the fuck?
Yeah, because he was still living with his dad. I know, seriously, yeah. And these meetings were secret because Rasputin, and by extension his followers, were not in the good graces of the town elders. And this is where shit starts to get weird. It was said that his women followers would ceremonially wash Rasputin before each prayer session, which is really weird. But it's also said that Rasputin had joined a group called Klisti, which was a religious group that rejected things like holy books, priests, saints, and they instead believed that they could communicate directly with God themselves. And B, they practiced self-flagellation and participated in orgies as a form of self-purification.
Oh, wait, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Orgies as a form of purification is not what I was expecting. Those are not things that I expect to hear in the same sentence.
Yeah. Nothing ever confirmed this, though. Like, it could have totally just been locals gossiping, but this time in his life is the beginning of Rasputin's legacy as we know it today. He was this charismatic, unpredictable guy, and depending on who you asked, he was either blessed by God or a total fraud. There wasn't really a middle ground. He was a divisive figure from the very start, and it only gets worse. So during this time, Rasputin was still wandering around, as you do, and eventually word started to spread across Russia about this really religious, interesting guy who could help people solve their spiritual issues, a wise man, basically. People started to seek him out, and eventually he got on the good side of some of the higher-ups in the Russian church, which brought him to St. Petersburg, the capital of Russia at the time.
I'm like singing the songs from Anastasia in my head right now.
Oh, Once Upon a December.
There's one. What's the one? It's like about going to St. Petersburg.
Have you heard? There's a St. Petersburg.
Yeah,
you know who I kept thinking about when I was working on this research? Bartok the Bat.
Okay, I was gonna say this at the beginning. My brother and I quote Bartok to each other
and
to
then
this day.
Her, sir.
I give her a ha and a ha and a hi. We do that to each other. We like chop each other and say that to this day. We're in our 30s.
So I did look up whether or not that was based on anything, like if Rasputin actually had a pet bat or something, and he didn't. But one good thing that came out of that research is that now I know there's a Wikipedia page about fictional bats.
What?
There's a whole Wikipedia page for it. Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes. Bartok is number 1 on the list.
Oh, he's the best. I love Bart. He's one of the best like sidekick characters of animated history. I love him.
They should make another Bartok movie.
Yeah.
So Rasputin winds up in St. Petersburg. And once he's there, his influence starts to spread throughout Russian high society, including the aristocracy. He was making connections left, right, and center. And through it all, he was collecting more and more followers. But this time, his followers had actual power. It's also worth noting that when Rasputin hit the scene in St. Petersburg, the aristocracy was kind of at a religious turning point. In a nutshell, they were really bored by the existing religious norms at the time. In comes Rasputin, this kind of cult leader-esque guy who wasn't part of the church. He really turned some heads. He was something new and interesting and shiny. So he got all of their attention. It was really easy for him to kind of ingratiate himself. On the 1st of November, 1905, Rasputin was finally invited to Peterhof Palace, where he was introduced to the Romanovs, Emperor Nicholas II and his Empress consort, Alexandra. It was a really brief meeting, and Rasputin left St. Petersburg shortly thereafter. But when he came back 8 months later, they reconnected and started developing kind of a friendship. And in October 1906, he met their children, including their son, Alexei, with whom Rasputin would develop a very unique relationship. We don't quite know how, but somehow Nicholas and Alexandra became convinced that Rasputin could heal Alexei, who was kind of a sick kid. Some historians say that Rasputin was introduced to them as a faith healer. Some say this came about later on. Regardless, less than 2 years after meeting Rasputin, he became the official faith healer for Alexei, who was suffering from hemophilia. And hemophilia is a bleeding disorder that basically stops your blood from clotting properly, which when your body struggles to stop bleeding, something as small as a cut or a bruise, which happens all the time in kids, can have really serious implications. So Rasputin being named his faith healer was a big fucking deal. Not only was Alexei a member of the royal family with a serious disease, but he was also the only boy and heir apparent to the throne. So trusting his life with someone who was not only not a doctor, but also someone with so many rumors surrounding them was a wildly contested decision. But his participation in the royal family didn't stop with Alexei. Rasputin was kind of just a really close family friend. Nicholas and Alexandra trusted him. The kids apparently loved him. There were 5 kids in total. And when you're close with the royals, you're close to power, which made a lot of people really uncomfortable really, really quickly. And Rasputin's influence over Alexandra in particular did not help matters. For anyone who hasn't heard this before, there have always kind of been rumors that Alexandra and Rasputin were having an affair. And whether or not they actually were didn't matter because people believed that they were. And Rasputin did himself no favors. In fact, he would openly claim that anyone who made physical contact with him would be purified. Like Ew. Weird shit. Yeah, he was just a weird guy.
Yeah.
But there are a few accounts of instances where Alexei would be, suffering from his condition, and Rasputin would just kind of appear and it would stop and Alexei would get better. One example of this came in the summer of 1912 when Alexei developed a hemorrhage in his groin area. He was in really, really bad pain, and all of his doctors were like, okay, he's probably going to die soon. We might just, he's probably about to breathe his last. Alexandra sent a telegram to Rasputin, who was fucking around wandering somewhere, and asked him to pray for Alexei. And Rasputin replied, and this is a quote, "God has seen your tears and heard your prayers. Do not grieve. The little one will not die. Do not allow the doctors to bother him too much." Alexei's bleeding stopped within the next few days, leaving his normal team of doctors shocked. I have an explanation. So Alexandra saw this as a miracle. And after this, Rasputin wasn't just a healer anymore. He was a lifeline to them. Mm-hmm. And once Rasputin had the Empress solidly in his corner, he had real power. He could do things like influence policy, help appoint people to positions. He never had like a formal legislative role or anything, but he was whispering in the ears of people who could make those decisions. In a modern context, though, the real reason for Alexei's miraculous recovery is way less exciting. Basically, back then, doctors would often treat patients like Alexei with aspirin, which is an anti-clotting agent. So they would essentially take this little boy who couldn't stop bleeding and give him even more bleeding. And it wasn't their fault. By this point, we didn't know that aspirin had anti-clotting properties to it. But Rasputin's advice to stop the doctors from bothering him is likely what saved Alexei.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That makes they didn't know that they were actively hurting.
They had no idea because that's just they used it to treat pain, and he was in a lot of pain, so it probably would have been one of the first things they did.
Oh, so yeah. Okay, yeah, because when you said that, I was like, what? Fuck that. What the hell?
No, I am firmly in the camp that Rasputin was a fraud.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I can't say 100%. I wasn't there. But, at least nowadays, I feel like hopefully a lot of people are in agreement with you. Because
we'll see. Keep an eye on that comment section. I might get dragged. Who knows? Yeah.
Leave Rasputin alone. Yeah, free Rasputin.
Oh, my God. Someday when we do merch, I want a Team Bartok shirt.
Oh my God,
that might be copyright infringement, though. Not if we spell it differently, maybe.
Well, we don't have to say which Bartok. We don't. Yeah, we can say free Bartok.
Free Bartok? Question mark?
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
Yeah, they don't own the name Bartok. Gotta be careful now, though, because it wasn't a Disney movie, but Disney owns, what was it, Fox now? So technically it's like a Disney. She's technically a Disney princess now.
Oh my God, give her her own fucking area in Disney World. Let me meet her. Give me the bat. Give me the bat.
I want that on a t-shirt.
Give me the bat.
Give me the bat.
Okay, back to this fucking guy.
I know. So, I'm so sorry about all the asides. I feel like
I'm appreciating it because
I'm like sensitive now after the last couple episodes.
So as far as the Romanov kids go, it wasn't just Alexei that Rasputin got close to. Alexandra let him form friendships with all of her children, including Anastasia. Rasputin would send them letters asking about their day. He would give them advice. He would visit them all the time, that kind of thing. But it didn't stop there. Rasputin made something of a habit out of visiting the Grand Duchesses, aka the daughters, while they were getting ready for bed, and was often seen hugging and, quote, patting them. By this point, they're like, youngest one is probably around 11 years old, oldest one is maybe 16, 17.
Okay. I was going to say no comment because I don't like that.
It gets worse. Yeah. On at least one occasion, one of the girls' governesses complained about the impropriety of this, and in return, Alexandra had the governess fired. In 1910, another governess who used to be a follower of Rasputin's said that he, trigger warning, raped her, and in response, Alexandra told her, everything Rasputin does is holy. The governess was fired in 1913. And these events scandalized the royal family. By this point, rumors were flying around that Rasputin had seduced not only Alexandra, but also her 4 daughters. And those rumors weren't isolated to the aristocracy. They definitely spread to the public. There were even cartoons doing the rounds that depicted Rasputin performing sex acts on Alexandra while her daughters watched.
Oh my.
Yeah, it was real gross. And it got to the point. It's so explicit. And yeah, it's ugh. I'm not going to link to those in the show notes.
Yeah, no. And yeah, that's like a big statement.
It got so bad.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Yeah. It got so bad that Nicholas actually ordered Rasputin to leave St. Petersburg for a while. But even then, his close relationship with the family continued. They exchanged letters. You know, it was kind of business as usual. He just wasn't physically there. And all of this led to a very stark split in sentiment towards Rasputin. Some members of the court viewed him as this visionary prophet, or just generally like a religious guy that you didn't want to fuck with just in case God was watching. But others thought that he was nothing more than a snake oil salesman taking the emperor and empress for a ride, literally in the case of the latter. And all of this kind of came at a flashpoint in Russian history. So by now, the First World War was raging. Russia was still adjusting to the abolishment. They got rid of serfdom about 50 years earlier. And the government was growing more and more bureaucratic. Meanwhile, the country was in an economic decline. And with scandals at home, that meant that the powers that be, including Rasputin and Alexandra, became increasingly and drastically unpopular. One politician at the time is quoted as saying that the Tsar's government had essentially become puppets and, quote, the evil genius of Russia and Tsarina were the ones holding the strings. It was very widely talked about in very public ways. The wheels of revolution had started to turn in Russia, and while it wasn't easy to remove Alexandra from the equation, Rasputin could be handled pretty easily, they thought. On the 12th of July, 1914, Rasputin had returned to his hometown for a little bit, and a peasant woman stabbed him in the stomach outside of his home. The woman in question was a really ardent and passionate follower of a guy named Sergei, who was a former priest and was also an absolute fucking Rasputin hater who had been actively trying to drive a wedge between Rasputin and the royals for years at that point. The woman claimed that she had not done this on Sergei's orders, but Neither the police or Rasputin believed her. It was widely considered to be a political move.
Okay.
As for Rasputin himself, he was hurt pretty bad, but he did wind up recovering after a surgery, and the woman was later found not guilty by reason of insanity.
Oh.
Which I didn't realize was a thing in 1914 Russia.
That's interesting.
Because I thought not guilty by reason of insanity was a much more recent-ish thing.
It feels that way. Like, I agree with that. I wonder, could there be the courts trying her also were not a fan of Rasputin?
That could have been it.
Do you know what I mean? And like, they were just like, oh, she's crazy. She didn't mean to. You know what I mean?
And you know what? I want to correct something I said earlier. It's not that she was found not guilty. She was found not responsible. And maybe there's a difference there.
Yeah. I don't know enough about Russian court system because that does seem, that gave me pause too. Like that feels surprising, but also I don't know what's normal in Russia. You know what I mean? I'm not familiar with that process. So especially 100 and whatever years ago. So,
oh, God.
But that is interesting. Yeah. I wouldn't expect that.
Just interesting. I had never ever heard that before. Like you hear the story of Rasputin's assassination every now and then, and just no one had ever said, "Oh, stabbed by a woman." I would have liked that story a lot more than the real one. Yeah. Anyway, so this failed assassination attempt was a failure of the anti-Rasputin movement. But anyone who has heard the story of Rasputin knows that this would not be the last attempt on his life. This is when we're going to start getting a little bit more into detail. Basically, there was this group of nobles who made a plan to try again. And there were a few people involved in this group, but for the purposes of this story, there are really only 3 names that you need to know. There's a guy named Dmitri, who is not our beloved Dmitri from Anastasia. He was actually the Grand Duke's cousin. There's a guy named Prince Felix, who was an aristocrat. He's not like a prince in the way that we think of them today. He was just kind of like really rich. And there was a guy named Vladimir, who was a far-right politician. He was the one that made that comment earlier about the puppets and like Rasputin and Alexandra pulling the strings of, whatever. So Dmitri, Felix, Vladimir. This time, they decided to lure Rasputin to Felix's family palace in St. Petersburg, which, oh my God, I'm so jealous. Imagine having a family fucking palace.
A family palace in St. Peter, especially in St. Petersburg. They have like some of the best architecture in the world.
Yeah, stunning.
Yeah.
And it's here that Rasputin would ultimately die. Beyond that, and this shocked me, the events surrounding Rasputin's death are a matter of speculation, and historians tend to agree that we will never quite know what happened.
Oh, that's interesting. Fascinating. Man, this is wild because I feel like that's how this whole story / era of time in Russia, I feel like that's how it is. Everyone's just like, this is what we think happened, but who the fuck knows?
And for such a pivotal event, too. I can't remember his exact name, but one of the prime ministers of Russia, an old prime minister, went on record saying that without Rasputin, there would have been no Lenin. Like, this is such a turning point in Russian history, and to not have knowledge of how it actually went down, it just never occurred to me. Because you hear stories about Rasputin and his death all the time, but just from a historian perspective, we will never actually know. That said, the guy whose palace it was, Felix, did write about it in his memoirs, and the story that he tells is the one we most often hear today. According to Felix, it happened like this. So Felix and Rasputin had met on multiple occasions in the past through their shared relationships with the royals. So when Rasputin was invited to Felix's palace, he didn't really think anything of it. He arrived at the palace just after midnight on the 30th of December, 1916. And apparently when Rasputin got there, they were like walking through the door. They had a gramophone playing some music, and Yankee Doodle was playing.
What the fuck?
Felix specifically mentions that in his memoir.
Wow. That's I've not heard that song since I think kindergarten music class.
I was trying to explain that song because Tom was asking me the other day, what the fuck is up with that song? And I was so well, it was kind of a patriotic thing, but I don't fucking know.
It's about making macaroni necklaces.
I had a teacher once told me that macaroni is what they used to call like heavy embellishments, like putting a feather in your cap. But
that makes
it's
sense.
only
No one
that
ever
one
told me that.
person that's ever told me that. So I don't know if it's true
Well,
or if she was just like, I don't know the answer, so I'm just going to tell these kids something.
Well, I'm going to tell everyone that now and just be like, I don't know, this is what I heard. Because this is the first time in all my years that anyone's ever given me this isn't the first time I've asked the question, but it's the first time I've ever gotten any semblance of an answer. So that's what we're going with.
Let's stick with it. I'm still picturing like dried macaroni on a tricorn hat. Me too. But okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Felix invited Rasputin to hang out in the basement, which sounds really weird. It. I know. Yeah. Like it sounds
just like you want to go play like some, Nintendo.
They're probably like Mario Kart in the basement. Yeah.
You got a pool table down there. My mama can pick you up if your mom can drop you off. Whatever. I don't know. Anyway.
So yeah, the basement bit is weird, but Felix had been in the process of refurbishing it to be something like an apartment. But the refurbishment wasn't ready by the time Rasputin was going to come visit. And he really wanted to do it in the basement because there were other people in the palace. He knew he was going to be killing someone. He kind of wanted to be away from the crowds. So the day of their little bro hangout sesh, Felix got workers to really quickly lay carpet, put up curtains, place furniture, and decorate the room with all of the trappings of like a wealthy household. So there was a Persian rug, there were some ornate vases, there was a crucifix that was made out of crystal and silver. There are pictures of what the room looked like, and it is actually very beautiful. So,
oh, cool.
And he did all of this to avoid arousing Rasputin's suspicion, so that when Rasputin was brought into the basement, he wasn't like, what the fuck am I doing in this gross-ass basement? This is sus as hell. Once they were down there, Felix, who Rasputin considered a friend at that point, said to Rasputin, hey man, there are a lot of people here who kind of want to kill you, so maybe you should leave St. Petersburg for a while. And based on the memoirs, this was a genuine, like, hey, you should get out of town. Rasputin refused, and Felix said that this is what sealed Rasputin's fate. At this point, Felix writes, I was determined, come what may, that he should not leave this house alive. So the night went on. Cakes, tea, and wine were brought out. At first, Rasputin refused the cakes because he just was one of those people who didn't have a big sweet tooth. But after a while, as you do, I know, same reaction, like
red
can't
flag.
relate. Can't relate.
Yeah.
But after a while, as you do, he kind of starts, oh, okay, I'll have one. I'll start
just
munching on
just a nibble.
One
just
little
bite.
Yeah, what he didn't know is that a doctor hired by Felix had laced the cake with cyanide a few hours earlier. And allegedly, there was enough cyanide in there to kill 3 men.
Oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
Deja vu. I'm so triggered.
Right? I didn't realize it was cyanide. Yeah, okay. Felix watched him eat these cakes, waiting in anticipation, expecting this poison to take hold any second. And Rasputin just kinda kept talking. He didn't appear affected at all. When Rasputin asked for wine, Felix poured the wine into a glass that he had already put cyanide into earlier, just in case he needed it. This time, after Rasputin drank the wine, he started to rub his throat a little bit, like he was having trouble swallowing. But when Felix asked him if he was all right, Rasputin was like, yeah, no, it's just a tickle in my throat. Can I have some more wine? And he had 2 more glasses of poisoned wine.
What?
Yeah. So by this point, it's 2:30 in the morning, and Felix is getting frustrated. Meanwhile, 2 of his accomplices, Dmitri and Vladimir, are waiting upstairs in Felix's study. And they've been waiting for so long that they kind of start doing the thing where you stomp on the floor so that people hear it below you. So Rasputin heard this, obviously, and Felix was like, oh, no, don't worry about it. We just like have other guests in the palace tonight. Anyway, can you excuse me for a second? Felix raced upstairs to go chat with Vladimir and Dmitri. And immediately when he entered his study, Dmitri and Vladimir were like, did it happen? Is he dead? Did you do it? And when Felix told them that the poison wasn't working, they were both like, oh, fuck. Like, what do we do? What are we supposed to do with this fucking guy? There was so much cyanide in him. So Dmitri, they have a little bit of a back and forth while they're deciding what to do. And Dmitri handed Felix his revolver to go finish the job. Felix went back down into the basement where Rasputin was looking a little bit worse by this point, like the poison might be having some effect on him. His head was drooping, his breathing had become pretty labored, and when Felix asked, "Hey man, are you okay?" Rasputin said that he had a burning sensation in his stomach, but that another glass of wine might help.
Oh my God. Okay, so I know we hate this guy, and I know that, like, we're not on his side, but I kind of love that vibe of, like, he just keeps asking for more wine because that'll be the thing that, like, I do. There's a little part of me that does relate to that.
I know. And I'm
not
so
on his team,
about,
but
like, why this would be happening, because cyanide, like we were talking about it in the last episode,
yeah,
like that amount, it's usually pretty instantaneous or shortly thereafter,
and it wasn't in anything, so it wouldn't have been like, that was another thing we talked about, like once the gelatin dissolved, it was like in your system. So if they just like had it in a glass and he was drinking it, that you would think that.
There are 3 theories about why the poison didn't work. The first theory is that they just used shitty-ass poison that had degraded over time and was no longer effective. The second theory is that Rasputin was paranoid enough that he intentionally developed resistance to common poisons by ingesting a little bit of it. Very unlikely.
Stop.
I don't think he actually did that.
Oh my God.
The third theory, which I think is the most likely, is that he had something called alcoholic gastritis, which is when you drink so much alcohol that causes your stomach to physically have less stomach acid in it. And when you ingest potassium cyanide, your stomach acid is what converts it into hydrogen cyanide, and that's what kills you. And if you don't have enough stomach acid to do that, it can prolong the length of time that it takes for the cyanide to hit. So that's why it was a longer lead time. I believe that one, personally.
Based on everything you just said and how many glasses of wine he asked for, I also believe that one the most.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking, my thought was he, when you said he was so, however you phrased it, like paranoid or whatever about being poisoned or people coming after him. Hey, I was not expecting you to say that he was like microdosing on cyanide. But I was thinking, could he have been prepared with, did he switch out the glass of wine? Did he have something like that or whatever? But that would be so hard to do. Like,
yeah. According to Felix's version of events, that didn't happen. But I mean, who's to say? Like, we don't know for sure.
Yeah, I don't know. That was like the only thing I could think of based on what you said. But I didn't know that about the stomach acid.
So potassium cyanide is still toxic, just less so than hydrogen cyanide.
Okay.
Da-da-da. Anyway, okay.
Anyway.
Where was I? Okay, so Rasputin is feeling a little bit worse for wear. The poison is taking its toll on him. Rasputin downs one more glass of wine before Felix says, "You better look at the crucifix and say a prayer."
Rasputin, to Rasputin, he says
Rasputin. So Rasputin turns to Felix in disbelief, realization starting to dawn of what's happening, and right then Felix shoots him in the chest.
Mm-hmm. Whoa! Rasputin, I don't know why that was so shocking. You literally said he had a gun. I don't know. That like that scared me.
The tension in that moment is like palpable. The realization of what's about to happen to you.
I like watched that on my brain TV as you were describing it. Yeah. Ooh, damn.
So Rasputin crumpled to the floor, and Dmitri and Vladimir rush in once they hear the shot. Rasputin was declared dead by these guys because there's no way he can survive that. He was shot, in the fucking chest. And the co-conspirators just turned off the lights, went upstairs, and locked the door, leaving Rasputin in the basement. In the meantime, a few of the other members of their little murder gang drove to Rasputin's apartment with one of the members dressed in Rasputin's coat and hat. The idea here was that if there were any witnesses who happened to be around, they would say they had seen Rasputin leave the palace and return home that night. Smart.
I was just going to say, I never know who I'm rooting for in the stories we tell, but that's smart. That's
smart.
Yeah, that's smart. Yeah.
Felix and Vladimir, though, didn't go with them. They hung back at the palace. They kind of chatted for a bit, debriefed about having just brutally killed someone, when all of a sudden, Felix got a feeling like something was wrong. He got this really strong, sudden urge to go back into the basement. When he got down there, Rasputin was still dead, still laying on the floor. But just to make sure, Felix grabbed his arms and started wiggling him around. Everything was as it should be until one of Rasputin's eyes snapped open, and then the other one. And then Rasputin leapt to his feet, literally foaming at the mouth, lunging at Felix, who sprinted upstairs, yelling for Vladimir's help. Meanwhile, Rasputin managed to drag himself out of a side door into the courtyard. So Felix and Vladimir are panicking at this point. They thought this dude was dead, so they rush outside once again to finish the job, and they gun Rasputin down in the snow. At this point, Felix claims that he conveniently passed out, but his other conspirators, who had just gotten back from Rasputin's apartment, wrapped Rasputin's body in linen, threw him in the car, drove to a nearby bridge, and then dropped him off into the freezing water just to make sure he was really dead. And that's Felix's story. There is another parallel story that is much less popular than Felix's, but it's one that I find more interesting. There's a claim that Rasputin had at some point raped Grand Duchess Tatiana, who was Nicholas and Alexandra's second daughter. And that story goes that Tatiana was also present when Rasputin was killed. Oh. According to this story, she didn't want Rasputin to recognize her because he might suspect something was up. So she disguised herself as a cavalry guard, with the idea that she would be able to get revenge on Rasputin for what he had done to her. And in this version of the story, Tatiana watched as Rasputin was castrated in front of her.
I mean, yeah, I definitely like that version better.
Yeah, I like that version better too.
Yeah. I think the first one's like, well, none of it's believable. I can't believe any of this.
Right.
But like, I know something happened to him. On paper, I feel like the first one makes more sense, but the second one, I like hope is real, you know?
Yeah, same. That said, all of it, like Felix's story, the story about Tatiana, all of it is unsubstantiated.
Yeah.
Regardless, though, after Rasputin died, news spread really, really fast. The next morning, an official investigation was launched into Rasputin's disappearance, and newspapers began reporting that he had died after a party at an aristocratic home. Slowly but surely, the clues started to come together. 2 workmen at the bridge found blood on the railing, and they saw a boot print in the ice below, leading police to start searching the area. They eventually found Rasputin's body trapped underneath the ice on the 1st of January, about 650 feet from the bridge, or 200 meters, which is, imagine finding a body trapped under ice. Yikes.
Imagine just being like, I know this isn't how it happened, but I'm imagining like ice skating. Just like, you know what I mean? Can you imagine? And it's just like, oh, yeah. Just like clawing its way. Yeah.
Oh, it's so scary.
Yeah.
So they found Rasputin's body. Now, an autopsy was performed, but the report was mysteriously lost.
Interesting.
The surgeon who performed the autopsy did later state that Rasputin had severe injuries, many of which he thought were inflicted after death. He said that he found a bullet still lodged in Rasputin's body, but that the bullet was too common and like just too degraded by that point to trace it back to anyone in particular. He also said he saw no evidence of drowning or poisoning, and instead Rasputin died from a close-range gunshot to the head.
Okay.
So we're never going to know what really happened that night. But Rasputin was buried on the 2nd of January, and the only people at his funeral were the imperial family and a few of their close friends. Rasputin's wife and kids were not even invited.
Oh my God, I forgot about them. Were they even still part of his life? What? Yeah.
Yes.
What the fuck?
So his wife, despite who Rasputin was, if you believe the rumors, his wife was completely devoted to him until she died. I think they had like 7 kids together.
Man, that's like, this sucks. Because I have so many questions about her now. I totally forgot about her.
Well, do you want to hear something? Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, I want to hear all the things. Please keep talking to me.
Do you want to hear something wild about one of Rasputin's daughters? This is my new favorite fun fact.
Okay,
So
yes.
Rasputin had a daughter named Maria. That wasn't her birth name, but she eventually moved away from Russia and adopted the name Maria. She left Russia, moved to America, and became a lion tamer in the circus.
No, she didn't. Are you serious?
Yes. Yep. There's a whole ass Wikipedia page about her.
Oh my God, are we going to do a circus flavor? That could be a good one. And
Can
you need
we
to
please?
Yes. And you need to do a story on that because I need to know more about that immediately.
There is so much to her story. Absolutely.
Dude.
That would be such a fun episode. So after Rasputin died, Nicholas would abdicate the throne later that year, at which point Rasputin's body was exhumed and burned by one of the revolutionary leaders. I didn't mean to pick an exhumation. I didn't know.
I will say I did know. Of the very few things I know specific to his story, I did know about that. So it's okay. I was prepared this time.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm so sorry.
I figured it would come up. I was going to say something, but I was like, I want to see how she's going to approach it. Yeah.
Yeah. Rasputin's death was supposed to be the end of him, but ironically, it kind of made him immortal, obviously. Like, people talk about him so much to this day. But the myth of Rasputin, the holy man, the mad monk, the unkillable mystic, still lives in the stories we tell now, and probably will for decades, if not centuries, to come. Blah. The end.
That's wild. That is such a wild story. Because like I said at the beginning, I'm so familiar with the story of the royal family and Nicholas and, Alexandra and all of them. But he has always been kind of this like mysterious shadow on this side of that story. All I knew about him was the unkillable mystic side, and there was a lot of discussion of, was he really a mystical magical man, or was he just a fraud, likely just a fraud? But I didn't know the specifics of any of that. Of the things I've read, there's so much alluded to, and just how dark his story is and how dark he is, or was, I guess I should say, or maybe not, I don't know. But I don't know, the specifics fuck with me. There's always, in anything you read, there's an air of him with the whole like rape stories and just how inappropriate and gross and awful he was. That's kind of alluded to, but I never looked into any of that because I kind of didn't want to know, because I was just like, ugh, I can't deal with this guy.
It's so hard with him because he was the subject of so much controversy. Let me say up front, I'm not saying anybody lied about these stories, but it does make it difficult to know which rumors or unsubstantiated things of him are true and which ones were just political maneuverings. Which again, I don't know if that's what happened, but it makes it really hard to verify the kind of man he actually was. I do think he was a piece of shit, but I don't have like historical, like it's a tricky one. It's a gray area.
Why is muddy, but like we can agree on that. But the specific proof is like, I don't know. I also wonder, we kind of talked about it on the New Year's Eve episode when we were talking about the creepypasta and, the Soviets as this weird, like mysterious thing. Russian history, I feel like Americans specifically have a weird relationship with it. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, there's this air of mystery in all of it for some reason. And I don't know if that could be part of why. So much Russian history feels like legend and lore. And I'm not saying it's specific to America. I'm just saying that has been my experience with it because, that's the only perspective I have. It feels like this weird magical mystery kind of place. But obviously it's a real country with real history. Just a lot of it kind of feels like it's on lockdown.
I totally agree. I think that there's such an American fascination with Russian history. And I'm thinking back on my experiences in school when I was learning about like the Bolshevik Revolution and how the Soviet Union came to be and how it fell and shit. And I'm not saying everyone had this experience, but the way I was taught about Russian history was always it's mysterious because we were told we shouldn't be able to relate to it. I think, which is kind of like, it's not to trivialize, but it's like the boy that your parents tell you that you can't date. You're going to be like, what the fuck is going on over there? That's so interesting. What is all this?
Yeah, I totally agree, to the extent that I didn't even learn about Russian history in school. We never.
And we barely learned it. Like, we learned some stuff, but not in depth.
Our world history was within the confines of, we learned about ancient Egypt and England. And that was it.
The two places that exist.
Those are the two places. And then this like nondescript something's going on in Africa that we probably need to like save or something like that. Yeah, like it was never, we never learned anything about Russia. Maybe, you know, something here that, but that's why I was always so fascinated by the Romanovs, because that's the family that we did know about. And it's because of this freaking knockoff Disney movie that everyone was obsessed with, you know? So that has always been, to this day, Russia's a mystery to me.
It's fascinating.
And it's easier now.
Someday.
Me too. I truly do want to go to St. Petersburg and Moscow. I would love to. But like you said, there's always this kind of air of, oh, stay away from Russia, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, to the point, did you ever watch Gilmore Girls?
No.
I don't think you did. Okay, there's just one line that I think is so, it captures exactly what we're talking about. So Emily, do you know like the characters, whatever? Emily's like the very fancy grandma.
Okay.
Yeah. Emily's the fancy grandma. She's very like old money. She's on the phone with someone at some point. She's planning something and she's talking about how they're going to have some sort of like Russian theme because it's safe to like Russia again. Because like there's such a on and off, America has such an on and off relationship with like approaching Russian history and just, you know, current politics and all that kind of whatever. That's a whole different rabbit hole. But like that I think so perfectly captures why it's so convoluted, because it's like, is Russia in or is Russia out? Yeah. I don't know. You know? Yeah. Anyway.
But yeah, it's
a fascinating story.
Yeah. Thank you for listening, because that was, I felt out of breath for about 75% of that because there was so much ground to cover. It was like, holy fuck, how are we going to fit this in an hour? So
listen,
thank
and
you
it
for
was
going on the ride with me.
This is exactly how I felt last week. We're at a very normal time. I know it feels like you've been talking for 4 hours probably, but you definitely have not. That actually felt very fast paced.
Brilliant.
I will say my only complaint is the lack of cartoon bats.
The lack of bat.
Give me
Bartok.
Give me Bartok.
I was so hoping that Google was going to tell me that Rasputin had a pet albino bat, and that's where it came from. But
I would have taken any bat. Yeah,
any
fruit
bat. Even
bat,
just like a stuffed plushy bat that he cuddled.
Oh God, you know what I just loved? Wait, I said that wrong. You know what I just realized, and I love it?
What?
In the movie, I have to like rewatch this movie now because I wonder if I just like remembered an Easter egg. He's got that weird gross lair and he's falling apart.
Yep.
I wonder if he was supposed to be in hell for that. You know, he's like coming from the underworld or something like that. I could just be making that up.
Maybe?
I might be. Yes. Yeah, that's I think what I meant to say. Yeah, purgatory, something like that. I might also just be getting it mixed up with Hades from Hercules, so I could just be making
this God.
Up.
I had and have the biggest crush on Hades from Hercules. That is my future husband.
Of course you do. That is not surprising at all.
He's hilarious.
Know who my Disney character crushes? Fucking Scar. I am so embarrassed by that.
Okay, that makes so much sense. Absolutely. Did you ever watch Lion King 2, Simba's Pride? Kovu?
Yeah,
come on.
He's too young for me, though.
But when I was like 8 years old,
yes,
I was like, oh my God.
Yes, that's totally. But that's a like same vibe. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But okay, so the Anastasia movie, bring it full circle. At the end, when he falls through the ice.
Yes,
I was the bridge with him being trapped under the ice. Mm-hmm. That's the connection. So
yeah. Oh, I made that connection as soon as you said bridge. I was like, here we are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cover your eyes. This is the scary part. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was fascinating. Absolutely wild. It's again these stories. So many people. When I say so many people, I mean Catherine. It's like you think you know something, and then it's like, oh, but. There's so much more to all these freaking stories, and this is just another one. I feel like everyone thinks they know everything about Rasputin.
Yeah.
And there's still more to learn.
This whole podcast has been an exercise in I did not know as much as I thought I knew.
I was thinking that just earlier today. I was like, you know what? We definitely didn't start this podcast because we think we know everything, but accidentally on this journey, speaking for myself, I've begun to discover just how much I don't know, which I think is great because it's making me feel a lot more comfortable because I've gone through life thinking that people talking about stuff just knew everything, and now I'm like, wow, these bitches don't know shit. So this is great for me because I'm much smarter than I thought I was.
And then you get to learn about all these cool, interesting, fascinating stories.
That has been so much fun. The last several episodes we've done, it's almost like information overload. And the story for next week that I'm going to be doing, I am in the process of experiencing that because I totally had no idea any of this. So,
okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'm ready
just
for
another
it.
one that we like think we know what we're talking about, and then we do research and we are like, well, for the love of God, no one knows.
Because I have a very clear picture in my head of what I think I know about the topic you're doing, and I'm 100% sure I'm wrong. Yeah, next week.
Yeah. I will say Rasputin was one that I knew that I didn't know. And I didn't know, I haven't known about a lot of yours, but some of them, like Sarah Winchester was another one that I came in, I was like, oh my God, I know this story. And then right off the bat, I was like, oh fuck, no, I don't. Okay, here we go.
Yeah. That's why I was with last week's one, the Tylenol. I thought I knew that story. Just blows your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I'm still recovering from that.
Anyway, me too. I couldn't believe I had to start researching next week's already because I'm like, oh God, I'm still coming down from last week.
I felt kind of bad for you about that. I was like, damn, I would want a break if I were
Yeah, I needed a little break. But that's okay. Yeah. This story was great. This was interesting. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us. Hopefully you all have learned some shit too. Or if not, hopefully you at least are enjoying hearing about what you already know. Yeah, until next time, little spoons. Keep it cool.
Keep it creepy.